Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. We're so happy that you could join us today. I'm Marlise Taylor, Director of Research for Visit North Carolina, and I'm really happy to be sharing this webinar with you today. So thank you for joining. Let's just go ahead and get started. In late 2020, we were notified by U.S. Travel Association, and they notified all of their users that their visitor spending model, the TEIM model, that they would be transitioning to working with tourism economics on that work in the future. So luckily for us, we've been working with tourism economics for many years through with our satellite account. And Adam Sachs, president of tourism economics, is no stranger to us at Visit NC, as he's spoken at several of our conferences and board meetings. And so as we've met with tourism economics over the last year regarding this transition, one thing that we have made clear to them and to convey is how important this methodology is to you, our partners. We know that for many of you, this is really the only research that you have access to, making it even more critical to your organization. So we know that that's very important, and we've conveyed that. Something that has been important to us at Visit NC is the consistency in the methodology of the visitor spending. So having used the model, the TEIM model from U.S. Travel Association for about 30 years, while there have been updates and revisions along the way, we have really relied on the continuity of that model that it provided. But I think you will find that tourism economics methodology will provide that continuity ongoing for us with the benefit of extra data sets and many years of experience. So let me now introduce Adam Sachs and his colleague, Caitlin DiPaolo, who will present the new methodology to you. If you do have questions, please be sure to type them in the Q&A and we will get to all of them at the end. Also, we are recording the webinar for those of your colleagues who could not join us this morning. So Adam and Caitlin, welcome and thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Marlise. Really appreciate the opportunity just to meet with all of you, and I have I think fairly modest goals for our time together. One is just wanted to introduce ourselves to you in this role, but I think more importantly, I wanted to give you a sense of the way that this work is put together, the data sources that go into it, and really make ourselves available to you for any questions. We were really honored as well as excited to be able to take this research on and really shepherd this research that's been conducted for a very long time with the U.S. Travel Association. And I would say that our mission was not so much to reinvent anything, but to refine some of the work that had been done and has served the industry very well for a very long time. So Caitlin DiPaolo, senior economist on our team, is here with me, and we will do our best to answer any questions that you have. I've prepared just a few slides for you to give you a bit of an overview, both just to let you know who we are, but then more importantly, to get into some of the details on how the research is put together. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you, and then we'll go from there. Let's see, one second. Great. So let me just, in the briefest manner possible, I'll introduce ourselves to you, and I don't want to take any more of your time than necessary. But we work with about 500 organizations each year across kind of the destination space, corporate space, as well as major trade associations around the world. Particularly in the U.S. state kind of destination marketing space, we work with about 40 state tourism offices each year. There are a number of states that are not shaded on this slide because it's just been within the last couple of months that we've begun working together. But for them, we do economic impact analysis, forecasting, trend analysis, budget studies, policy analysis, data analytics, and insights for our Symphony platform. And so this is something that we do all the time, this is our first time doing it with y'all in North Carolina. Our team is now, I think, about 32 economists on the team, but we're supported by a team of 200 economists at Oxford Economics. And Caitlin leads the team here on the work for North Carolina. So let's jump into the substance of our time together and talk a little bit about the methodology. As I mentioned, we're seeking continuity with the historic travel economic impact model, the TM model from the US Travel Association. And so that really is our benchmark, the starting point for all of the work. But there are a couple of things that we've sought to do in this update. One is aligning with the travel and tourism satellite account, both at the state level and at the national level that the Bureau of Economic Analysis produces on an ongoing basis. And we've also integrated international, not only at the state level, but also at the county level. The kind of the key dynamic of all of this modeling is bringing together multiple data sources. What we're doing is seeking to define visitors to the state and to each county and their spending. We define visitors as anyone who stays overnight in their location, not obviously in their own home, but they in overnight accommodations outside their home, or who traveled more than 50 miles to, outside of their normal routine of travel. Well, measuring that requires multiple data sources. And so on the right-hand side, you'll see the different data sources that are brought together for this analysis. The first is survey data from OmniTrack, Travel Track America, and it's a long-standing survey of U.S. household travel patterns. It looks at where they go, where they come from, who they are, what they spend their money on, and the type of visitor that they are. So really valuable survey data that really becomes our starting point in understanding both the volume of visitors and who they are and how they spend money once they get to North Carolina. The second bullet is a range of government data sets that are really important in the analysis. U.S. Census Bureau, from Census, we get data on the value of sales revenue by industry type. From the Bureau of Economic Analysis, we get data on the output by industry, as well as income and employment. Bureau of Labor Statistics gives us data on employment and wages at a very detailed sectoral level by county. Another important data point is seasonal second homes. For many of you, the county level, seasonal second homes for recreational use is a really important part of the industry. And the US Census data gives us that metric at the county level as well. So that's the government data set on the second bullet. The third bullet is industry data from STR. Many of you will be familiar with STR as a preeminent provider of hotel data. From them, we get demand, revenue, occupancy, and rate. AirDNA, this is data on short-term lodging, things like Airbnb and VRBO. That's not available for all counties, but for the ones where we have it, it's certainly really useful. The same would be true of key data on home rentals. The fourth bullet is Federal Highway Administration and U.S. Energy Information Administration, important data in regards to transportation and expenditures. So we get automotive and gasoline price data there. Then we also compile data. Marlise and her team are really helpful in making this happen as we pull together tax collections data for bed taxes, as well as total taxable sales receipts for key industries. And then the last category of data is tourism economics. We have our own data sets for international travel by origin country and by state destination. And that gives us information on how much are international visitors spending in North Carolina, both overseas as well as Canadian and Mexican visitors. That's based on a combination of aviation data, the survey of international air travelers from the Department of Commerce, and credit card data from Visa. As I mentioned, this all gets combined with the platform of the Travel Economic Impact Model from the U.S. Travel Association. But just to call your attention to the diagram on the bottom left, the process of bringing all this data together is designed to create a full picture of travel. So every category of traveler, as well as every area of spending. And so the different data sets you can see, just as you look at them across the bullets, give us different visuals of traveler activity, but they also cross-check each other. And so, for example, we want to make sure that what the survey data are saying about, say, spending at hotels is consistent with what bed tax data are saying. or what STR data are saying. And so right there, you've got a triangulation of data points on a single measure. And so that ability to cross-check is really, really important. We also, particularly at the county level, want to be able to ensure that the results are consistent with government data on the known size of each industry. We know from census data what the size of the lodging industry is in each county, for example, or the restaurant industry or the recreation sector. We want to make sure the results are consistent with those. And so all of these different data sets have a benefit of cross-checking and complementing one another. Right, from there, we run an economic impact model. And what that economic impact model does is takes all the visitor spending and simulates that going through the North Carolina economy. And it from there measures employment, income, and taxes for three levels of impact. The first is direct. So that's where visitors are making a direct impact on businesses, where they're spending money at restaurants, hotels, recreation, attractions, and transportation, retail, those key categories where they're visitor facing. That's where the direct impacts happen. And so there's a certain level of GDP, business revenue, jobs, wages, and taxes that happen within those industries that face the visitor. Well, the second category is indirect impacts. Those indirect impacts, you can also think about them as the supply chain. That's the flow of money from those businesses that face the visitor as they buy money from other businesses. So it's the supply chain, food wholesalers, utilities, or rent. Any factors of production represent the indirect impacts. But the last layer is the induced impact. And the induced impact, sometimes it's also called the income effect, but it is the impact of wages that are earned as a result of the first and second layer of impact that gets spent again in the North Carolina economy. And so you can imagine households that are employed in the travel industry, well, how other industries benefit because those households are then spending money in the local North Carolina economy, and that represents the induced impact. In one picture, this is what the model looks like. We're taking visitor spending there in that first box by category of spending, accommodation, all the way through different transportation sectors. Modeling that, we use a platform called InPlan, which is one of the most widely used economic impact models at the local level by economic development agencies, to then trace that spending through the economy to measure its impact on these measures over on the right. That's production or business sales, jobs, wages, and taxes, including indirect and induced impacts. So that is the conceptual framework for what we're doing. All right, so let's just jump into the high-level results for North Carolina. I'll share with you a bit on the counties, and then Caitlin and I are happy to take any questions that you have. All right, so the key findings for the state level, well, of course, 2020 was a really challenging year for the industry globally, and North Carolina was no exception, where we saw visitor spending fall just about 32%. Still, $20 billion was spent by visitors in North Carolina last year. That spending supported 178,685 jobs in the state, but that also fell by about 26%. And then on a fiscal basis, those visitors generated $1.8 billion in state and local taxes. That's the equivalent of $453 per every household in North Carolina. To show you this in terms of trend, if you go back to 2016, you can see $25.3 billion was spent by visitors. We saw, continued increases through 2019, and then this rapid fall in 2020. Of course, 2021 is already looking a lot better. We didn't have significant parts of the year that were closed, although certain segments of the market have been suppressed, such as business travel and corporate and group travel. 2021 is already showing clear signs of recovery relative to 2020. So we're, of course, eagerly anticipating what 2021's recovery looks like. But right now, the snapshot on 2020 was a very challenging year with that decline. We break out the detail by category of spending. You'll note that the largest category of spending is actually food and beverage. And that's because day trips do represent a significant part of travel. And also because even those that are some, people spending, let's say, staying with friends and relatives or at their own seasonal second home, the lodging component isn't going to be as important for them in terms of their spending. And so food and beverage, again, represents a relatively large share at 35%. We also do break out international and domestic. Of course, international in 2020 was nearly non-existent for a significant part of the year. And so you can see that a very small contribution of international in 2020 compared to domestic. And then just a couple of points in terms of putting these results in context. Just look at jobs here. I mentioned 178,685 jobs supported. That's directly by tourism. Well, that still was a 64,000 job decline in 2020. But I think it's noteworthy that even that direct number, the smallest job number, does represent 3% of all jobs in North Carolina, 1 in 33. And then let me turn to county analysis, and then we'll take time for questions. The analysis is done for every one of the North Carolina's 100 counties. The visitor spending is analyzed in the same way as the state level by category: lodging, food and beverage, recreation, shopping, and transportation. All of the county results are constrained, of course, to the state analysis. The state analysis is an extremely high confidence level. And so we want to make sure that, of course, the sum of the counties equals the state. That's an essential part of the modeling. The allocation of that analysis of the state results to each of the counties does include an analysis of that government data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Bureau of Economic Analysis at the county level for employment, establishments, and income by industry. So we have each of those measurements for the hotel industry, for the food and beverage industry, for transportation, recreation, and entertainment, gives us a starting point basis for the allocation of those state results to individual counties. Then we also incorporate seasonal second home data from census, that is county level data, lodging data from STR, AirDNA were available on short-term lodging, and of course, bed tax receipts for a sharper point still on what's going on at the county level. There are select counties where we've worked with them at a intensive level, looking at their survey data as well as their industry data, and that also features in the analysis as well, particularly for Buncombe County and for Wake County. All right, we then also bring in airport data, so aviation data for counties where there's an airport. So that's going to help substantiate the transportation data. And ultimately, if you just kind of draw your eyes over to the right-hand side, the things that we want to achieve by bringing all this data together is, one, we want to make sure that the results are driven by and constrained to the known value of visitor-related industries in each county. So that government data, as well as the industry and tax data, just really important. We want those things to define what happens in each county for individual categories of visitor activity. But further, and that's the second bullet on the right, is that as a state top-down and county bottom-up approach, this methodology ensures that the sum of the parts do equal the whole, which is conceptually as well as mathematically really important. All right, in the end, what we've produced for every county is visitor spending by sector, employment, personal income, employment, and taxes. And then just to give you one visual, just to give you a sense for how even the percentage change across the state really did vary in 2020. You can see this heat map of the state, county by county. As you go to the green areas, you can see increases in visitor spending. And then as you move to darker blue, that's where visitor spending on a percentage basis fell most sharply. And so even within that 34% decline in visitor spending, there's quite a lot of variety in how the state performed across the year. The year, of course, had different parts to it. It started out a couple of months in normal. We had some months where things were virtually shut down in many parts of the state, and then different rates of reopening, as well as different rates of visitors' response to that reopening. And so those parts of the state that were more exposed to business travel or to meetings or to international or to air travel, well, they generally experience more significant declines than those that perhaps were less exposed to those. Those would be more rural, more pure leisure, those with a significant drive market. And so those dynamics really did produce a pretty wide range of performance in 2020. So that was a bit of a fast tour through the methodology and the results. But what Caitlin and I wanted to do is to spend as much time as you'd like answering any questions you may have. We may not be able to answer questions regarding specific counties at this point, but if nothing else, I hope this gives you a sort of a framework for asking questions, and of course, an opportunity. This is an opportunity for us to say, we're certainly available for specific questions as they come up. So I've stopped sharing my screen, and Marlise, Caitlin, I'm happy to welcome you back. If anyone has any questions, happy to do our best.
Thanks, Adam. I'm going to pull up a few questions. The first one I have is, can you explain the differences in the old 2019 methodology with U.S. travel and then the new 2000? So not even looking at 2020, can you explain some of the differences that we're seeing from 2019, the old methodology, to the new 2019?
Absolutely. There are really two kind of changes methodologically that did make a difference for some counties. One was that historically, the county level analysis only included domestic travel, so it didn't include international. We have because of the way that we've incorporated all these data sets, we've been able to incorporate international at the county level as well. So that affects some change. The other is that this is something we did at the national level for U.S. Travel Association, and for every state, we aligned with the BEA's travel and tourism satellite accounts. And that's a newer piece of research than the travel economic impact model. And that alignment's important, particularly in regards to transportation. And so you'll see at the state level a shift in travel spending from transportation to things like food and beverage, recreation, and lodging. And what this really means is that it better represents actual dollars spent in counties. The previous methodology, transportation measurements, did include a certain amount of personal auto usage. And while that represents impact at a state level, is very difficult to assign to any individual county. I think this better represents transportation spending at the county level. And really, it ultimately represents the actual transactional value, financial value of visitors to each county, because it's a personal auto usage doesn't really generate economic value in a particular county, but certainly spending at restaurants, hotels, attractions, and shops does. And so there's been a bit of a shift in terms of the categories that you may note as well. Caitlin, did I miss anything? Anything that you would add to that? No. Okay.
I think you covered it.
Okay, another question is, a particular county is asking about some inconsistencies. They saw considerable increases in occupancy tax and sales tax collected in 2020, but the report showed their total loss down 2%. Can you help explain this? I know this is a particular county. We're not going to get into counties, but if a county did see some inconsistencies between their lodging, their local, what they gathered locally and what was presented in the model, can you kind of help explain in general why that might be?
Absolutely. I think there are a couple of things that can help explain where you might see what appears to be an inconsistency between bed tax and overall spending. One is that for quite a number of counties in North Carolina, the traditional hotel market represents a relatively small share of even the accommodation market. That second homes and visiting friends and relatives and of course day trips wind up making the hotel bed tax. While it can certainly be an important piece, it's not as defining as you might think, because there's a lot of spending in other parts of the economy that's not necessarily in hotels. But you may say, well, certainly that reflects a certain volume of visitor and trend, and you'd be right. But one of the things that we've found, and we've been looking at North Carolina bed tax data for a long time with Marlise as part of the tourism satellite account work, is that the trend on bed taxes is not always a true indicator of trend in hotel revenue. And there are a number of reasons for that. Some of it has to do with reporting, the timing of payments. But when we've analyzed that year over year, if you look at the trend of bed tax for quite a number of counties, it is really noisy year to year. There are years where there are jumps in bed tax both directions, where some of them you wouldn't want your economic impact results to be defined by the volatility that we've seen year to year in some of the bed tax collections as well as reported revenue. And so there's noise in that data that would make us want to look at that in context, what's being said by STR, what's being said by US Census, and then some of the other data sets. So I think those two things are important to keep in mind. One is the kind of the some of the natural, I guess, intrinsic issues with some of the bed tax data, but also the fact that hotels don't always represent the majority, and sometimes they actually quite a minority of overall visitor spending in a county.
Thank you. And then I think you answered this other question I have about lodging expenditures, how they're calculated. So let me move on to the next one. It also regards lodging is if a particular county, I know you have some AirDNA data from other destinations you've worked with, but if a particular county has AirDNA data at the county level, can they submit that to you? Would that help the process? What would the process be about doing that?
Yeah, I'm glad. Thanks for that question, because that's one of the other things I wanted to come out of this, which is that as we look toward updating this for the year that we're in now, we want to make an open invitation for any information that you have that you feel would help, and that's certainly the AirDNA short-term lodging data. That's a really important piece. We've compiled it for all of the destinations where we've had access to it for this run. But certainly, in next time around, please do forward that to us. And Marlise, you can provide guidance on the best method for setting up how we want to do that transfer. But we'd certainly be more than open to it. Not only that, but any other category of data that you feel like would be helpful.
Yeah, and I would say if you just, I don't mind if you have extra data that if you want to send to me that I can collectively gather until we can come up with some kind of a portal for you to enter it. But if you have AirDNA data or key data at the individual county level that you want to submit for this model, if you want to send it to me, I'm perfectly okay with gathering it together and getting it to Tourism Economics. And I think this would, be a great benefit to all of us. One quick question about how, and I'm going to just answer this one, how they can tell whether their county was affected more or not by the model changes. We did provide the historical data. We worked with Tourism Economics, and on our partners page, there is historical data from 2016 through 2019, and that is available to you. And so you can go on there and see what your adjusted historical data is back to 2016. So that will kind of help you. There are some counties that there were rather large adjustments, and there were some that they weren't adjusted as much with the new and additional data that Adam has talked about. So if you have specific questions about your county, I'm happy to help you kind of walk through that historical data, but that is available on our partners page. Another question is about how you take into account the proportion of spend at restaurants by residents versus visitors. And I know that that is an important part of the model in some particular counties that may have a higher population where you would see a lot of restaurant spending, but also high visitation. So can you just, I know that this is complex, but if you could briefly explain how that is taken into account at the county level.
Sure thing. Every single county has a set of metrics that the model produces that essentially represents its visitor intensity. And so what is its visitor intensity relative to the state? And that's defined by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Census, and Bureau of Economic Analysis data, but then gets further sharpened by bed tax and STR AirDNA data where it's available. And that visitor intensity then adjusts to what it flows into the restaurant component. So some of it is overnight. So we get a measurement of number of overnight visitors, whether they be staying at friends and relatives or their own seasonal second home or rental or a hotel. Well, of course, there's a certain amount of restaurant activity that is associated with that. If a destination has a significant share of recreational attractions that clearly are not supported by the population, then also that weights into not only recreation, but into restaurants, because those people are not just going to a state park or to an amusement or a museum, they're also eating. And so that all flows in. But the kind of the key thing to note is that it's building up to a level of restaurant spending that is attributable to visitors. And so the residual winds up being the resident part. So we're focusing on the visitor, their restaurant spending. And then a final cross check is, well, what is the implicit share of restaurant spending that is getting attributed to visitors versus restaurants? And we check that against the population numbers and make sure that it's giving us reasonable numbers on restaurant spending relative to the size of the restaurant industry in each county.
Great. I hope that helps explain that. I know that is really a critical piece to many counties. Another question is about, are we getting traditional vacation rental data? I will tell you at the state level, we do. We get key data at the state level, and we also get it at the economic development region, the prosperity zone level. But in terms of county data, we do not subscribe to that because there's 100 counties. So if you do have vacation rental data that you would like to provide for this model, we would, again, certainly take that, similar to the AirDNA data that we've requested. So any data really that you have at your county level, and that kind of leads into my next question, is what other data can our partners help gather that would be helpful to the model that maybe you don't have? I know you have so much census data and government data, but is there anything, we talked about AirDNA and we're talking about key data or vacation rental data. Is there anything else maybe that's at the county level that we don't currently have access to, or we're having trouble gathering, that our partners could help improve the model?
One thing that does occasionally come up as we do local level research is there may be a significant attraction that has their own research on number of visitors or visitor related spending. So that could be shopping outlets, or a major theme park or recreational center, cultural attraction. And if they're doing any tracking, that can be a useful benchmark. And sometimes that will reveal something that otherwise we wouldn't have seen, because it's a unique attraction that isn't even showing up in the government data in the way that you might expect.
Great. So attraction data. So you hear that, everyone. Send me your attraction data. Another question is, can we share what their share of restaurant business is attributed to visitors? I think maybe the sector spending that you all are providing us for the first time, we've never gotten sector spending at the county level before. So I think I'll let the economist answer, but I think that will certainly help you look at your the resident or the visitor share, and then if you compare that maybe to your total restaurant sales. Adam, Caitlin, does that sound like an easy, fair way to do that?
Yes, you can take a look at the 2017 census. and they'll have sales at the food and beverage level, that industry. So you could take those visitor sales and do a comparison that way.
What about looking at gross collections from the Department of Revenue data that may be more recent than 2017? Would that be just as good as the census data in terms of comparing the food and beverage sector that you provide us to the total?
Honestly, I would compare it to both. Certain things may not be taxed the same way, but certainly another good metric to look at.
Okay. So if you all have questions about that Department of Revenue data, it's all available on their website, though I will tell you it's a little bit clunky and hard to find sometimes. So be prepared to dig a little bit, or let me know if you have trouble. But again, this sector level research that tourism economics has provided us this year at the county level is really something new and I think a great added value to this project. You've never, y'all have been asking me for years, what proportion of the spending is restaurants and what is retail and so on. So I think that sector level spending is going to be something that you are really going to get a lot out of. Those are all the questions that I have right now. Does anyone else have any other questions? I'm seeing a few about just some comments about the occupancy tax collections are showing that lodging spending was greater than the report shows, but I think we've talked about that a little bit. Again, if you all have questions, we're happy to answer them. Also, if you have questions continuing on, if you want to send them through me, I'm happy to share them with Adam and Caitlin. I do want to know what your questions are so I can better help you at the Visit NC level. But I will certainly work with them to get answers for you if there are parts of the model that you don't understand or you need more information about. Okay, yes, someone asked about the past years being revised. Yes, we sent the revised numbers in the partner email, and they are also posted on partners.visitnc.com/research/visitor spending or economic impact, I think it is. But if you go to that same web page that you've been going to for years for your county level spending, you'll see a PDF file available for download that offers 2016 through 2020 data, both spending, and then there's another file that has historical jobs, taxes, and income for you. So you can go back and compare to see how the new methodology was revised. Also, you will not see the drop down. I'm going to kind of plug this for a second. You will not see the same drop down menus that we used to have. We are working on a new dashboard that will be available on our website, on that partners page for you, so that you'll be able to pull your individual county like you used to. It's not quite ready yet. We've given them this data to put into the dashboard, so it will be available soon. However, all the data that would go into that is in those PDFs that are available on the website now. So if you have questions about those, let me know. But all the data, historical 2016 through current 2020, is available for you now. Are there any other questions? Okay, I know that there's a little lag, so I was just wait for a second, but I don't see any. But I just want to thank Adam and Caitlin, both of you, for being here today. I want to thank you for all of your work. I know you've suffered through many emails back and forth from me and then our partners, but we all appreciate the work you're doing, and it really helps to have a dedicated team. I will say you've been very responsive and helpful to me and to our team at Visit NC in answering the many questions that we've had. Again, partners, we're always here for you, and our job is to provide you the best research that we can. So please let us know if you have additional questions, and we will work with you and try to help you understand this. The model, the methodology is also on our partners page. So similar to what Adam presented today, that methodology is available for you. I know a lot of you get questions from media or legislators at the local level for explanations on how the data is collected and estimated. So please take a look at that methodology if you have kind of broad questions, but any specific questions, please know that we're here to assist you, and we will get you answers as best we can. So thank you again today for joining us. And again, we will have this recording available for you if you want to go back and listen to it, or if you have colleagues who weren't able to join us. So thank you, Adam and Caitlin.
Our pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Hope everyone has a good afternoon.